On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're going to dive into the Oklahoma City Thunder offseason with your mailbag questions. What do you want to know about the Thunder? And should the Oklahoma City Thunder dive into the Utah Jazz pool of players with their disgruntled stars in Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell? All of that and more coming up on today's Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles, media member and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're going to dive into the mailbag edition of Locked On Thunder, answering all of your questions, including about the draft, and about the offseason as a whole, and the Utah Jazz, who have experienced a huge meltdown in the playoffs. And so we're going to dive into, should the Thunder try to go get Rudy Gobert, go get Donovan Mitchell in this rebuild with their treasure trove of draft picks and everything else of the sort. But thank you for making Locked On Thunder your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Subscribe for free across all platforms so you never miss an episode, including the platform of YouTube. Now, our first question of the day comes from at Andrew Baxter 90. Do the Thunder buy into the Jazz players' feuds? If they do, should they be buyers for Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell? And what do you think their best offer would be? And is it competitive enough for the other teams? Well, if you didn't know, the Utah Jazz have incredibly bad vibes right now. Just bad vibes all around. They are the only team, well, they're one of the only teams in NBA history to look like from game 1 to game 6, they just had no interest in being in the NBA playoffs. They weren't bought on defensively. They didn't really care offensively. They just weren't good. Not good. And the vibes extended into the offseason, or their early offseason. And you even saw players, coming off the court, not shaking hands with other players. It was just a bad vibe. And so now you have this nucleus of Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and Quinn Snyder. All are projected to not be there next year, right? You're getting reports that the Lakers want Quinn Snyder. That is understandable considering how good of a coach he is. I think that it will be very interesting to see if he takes that job or not with the Lakers, but that's not a surprise. He's a good coach, and if the Jazz are going to kind of reset things, maybe he'd rather go to LA. So Quinn Snyder might not be there. One of the top coaches in the NBA. Rudy Gobert is now supposedly demanding a trade and doing it in a he or me fashion. How legitimate is that report? How much stock can you put into it? We don't really know yet, but that's supposedly happening. And then Donovan Mitchell, who is locked in for another 3 or 4 years in Utah on that kind of max extension. He will not give a definitive yes or no answer when it comes to, does he want to be in Utah? It's yeah, it hurts right now, but yeah, I do, but I got to think about it, for this next week and really got to reflect on the playoffs, things like that. And so there's ways you can spin it to make yourself not feel as bad if you're a Utah fan. And that's what we'd be doing here in Oklahoma City if it was, say, Shea. But it wasn't an emphatic yes. If you go back and watch that post-game press conference and the end of the season press conference, those weren't emphatic yeses from Donovan Mitchell. For example, look at SGA this year. You walked away from SGA's end-of-season press conference and thought, wow, this guy wants to be in Oklahoma City. This guy wants to build in Oklahoma City. This guy wants to grow in Oklahoma City. This guy is being legit, right? He not only said the right thing, he conveyed it in such a way that it was believable. For Donovan Mitchell, that wasn't really the case. And so he's got $32 million on the contract on the books next year. He's got $34 million on the books in 24, 25, and then a player option for $37 million in 25, 26. That's kind of whenever he kind of runs out of room. He's likely not going to turn down $37 million at age 29. So let's say he picks up that option. Then he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026. So he's under control until 2026. And for Utah, you can't even count on him wanting to be there. So this offseason looks to be one that will be critical for Utah and that they could overturn their roster. The difficult spot about it is finding teams that work within the salary cap to trade for either one of these players who run big deals. And then getting a third team involved is always an option, but it's always a very difficult option. Enter the Thunder. The Thunder do not have as much cap space as people might think that they do. Once the new calendar year turns over, they're not going to be in the salary cap floor anymore. That SGA extension is going to kick in. Derek Favors is going to be opting into his $10.1 million player option, which he got, the Thunder got from Utah for a first round pick that's heavily protected, in terms of the top of the draft, protected. Kemba Walker is owed $27.4 million. Kyle Singler still owed $1 million in dead money. And then, you theoretically could extend Darius Bazley and Lou Dort this offseason, although didn't get the vibe that they would be extending anybody. That they seem like they want to enter 2023 with a clean book and then work from there. But obviously, it would not shock anybody to see either one of those guys extended, especially Lou Dort, who's playing still on a bargain contract. So it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver this. For me personally, the Thunder eventually do have to consolidate these draft picks and have to go all in. They cannot continually kick the can down the road of their rebuild and of what they want to do. However, they have to make sure whoever they trade for is the right option and is the right player to go get. And is that Donovan Mitchell, who was an absolute turnstile in the NBA playoffs and could not play defense worth a lick? Is that Rudy Gobert, who we've seen in the playoffs not play as well in the regular season? Now, it's easy to hate on Rudy Gobert. I think that Rudy Gobert is still a very good player and undervalued right now by the NBA media fan sphere, but still a really good player. To me, it's just not the right time. Again, the natural progression to me will be determined in 14 days whenever the lottery happens. But if you get good lottery luck or good enough lottery luck, this year is another year of development, but it's the best year of development. It's the year when you have the most talent compiled on one single roster since the rebuild began. And you start growing with this team and learning this team's habits. Next offseason, 2023, whenever you get the new CBA, whenever you get the new CBA, you get the new clean cap sheet that we just talked about, and you have all those draft picks still. That's the year where you can start pushing all in and then trading for proven NBA talent versus trading up in a draft. So I think it's still too premature, and I'm not sure that these guys are the right guys to trade for. I'm just not. We've seen now Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs not look good offensively. We saw Dorian Finney-Smith, who's a really good defender, lock down Donovan Mitchell. And so it's not as though he's just an overpowering player offensively. And then he did not produce defensively either. So then you're left with what? And sure, you can excuse this playoff against the Mavericks as just bad vibes. But it certainly seems like there's more going into that than is leading to believe with the bad vibes. But I just don't think that either one of those guys are the guy for the Thunder to move forward with. I want to answer one more question for the break from Aaron Wiggins stan. I love Aaron Wiggins, so you know that I am also an Aaron Wiggins stan. What celebrity hooper would be the best fit on the Thunder in your current opinion? So who's the very best celebrity hooper? That's my thing. And of course, the caveat is cannot be a former NBA player or anything like that. Celebrity, non-basketball player. You watch the celebrity game. Now, can I do athletes? Because if I can do athletes, Myles Garrett looked awesome in that celebrity basketball game in Cleveland during All-Star Weekend. But if I can't do athletes, I'm trying to think. Wasn't Justin Bieber pretty good that one year that he played in the celebrity game, or like those couple of years he played in the celebrity game? Let's look up NBA celebrity teams celebrity game rosters. And we see here the Ruffles celebrity game. Yeah, I think it's Justin Bieber. If you can't go athlete, if you can go athlete, how can you not love Miles Garrett and that like 360 dunk he displayed in this game? But that's where I'm at right now. I thought Quavo was good at basketball, but I could be wrong. So maybe it's him. Yeah, that's an interesting question, but it's tough to nail. So let me know your answer on Twitter or in the YouTube comments below. But coming up, let's talk more about the NBA draft and more about this offseason for the Thunder. But first, I want to tell you right now, we're good friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is a fantastic protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Go to builtbar.com, use the promo code LOCK15, 15% off of your next order, folks. Built Bar is incredible. It has everything you need. It's a protein bar, but it tastes like a candy bar with 100% real chocolate on the outside of every single bar. You're going to want to check it out yourself. Go do that today. Most Built Bars have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You compare that to a candy bar, which typically has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and a dozen net carbs. Go to built.com and get your favorite flavors today, like banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so on, including my favorite flavor, which is cookies and cream. Go check them out today at built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15. That's the promo code LOCK15. It'll get you 15% off your next order. Built.com, promo code LOCK15, 15% off of your next order. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're answering your questions, your mailbag questions, but thank you for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA Big Board, hosted by Rafael Barlow, giving you all you need to know about the NBA draft with big boards, breakdowns, mock drafts, everything you need to know about the NBA draft, which is very important for the Thunder. So go check them out today. Locked On NBA Draft Big Board. We're back now, and we're going to answer more of your questions. This next question comes from at Alex Dr. Proof. Do we value Shaedon Sharpe too high because of his mystery? I feel like if we want to get a proven athletic shooting wing with defensive and playmaking upside, we could just take Mathurin. And then he left the comparison between that Family Guy episode where Peter Griffin won a boat, and then they offered him, instead of a boat, a mystery box. And he told Lois, it could be anything. It could even be a boat, this mystery box. So, I see where you're coming from on this. I do like Mathurin. I have Mathurin rated fairly high at pick number 8 for me, at slot number 8 for me on my big board. But I just think that Shaedon Sharpe's athleticism is a step above Mathurin. I think that his upside is a step above Mathurin, right? I think that his upside is higher than Mathurin's is, and his athletic ability is higher than Mathurin is. Now, I think that you have to bet on Mathurin's defense more, and I'd even bet on Mathurin's shooting more. So it's just kind of a factor of those components and how you evaluate them. Mathurin is 20 years old, and so it seems like you can evaluate the ages as well in these two players, where you have Mathurin 20 years old and Sharpe at 19, pretty comparable in the grand scheme of things. I just think that with Shaedon Sharpe, he's kind of going to test out very well in the combine. You're already seeing him have his verticality tested, and he has MJ numbers on the verticality test. Now, what all went into that video, who knows? But yeah, I can see the point here, but I'm still very high on Shaedon Sharpe, and we'll talk more about him during both these players' NBA draft profiles and projections. But at Fran Sordani, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Do you think we see any offseason moves depending on where we land at the draft? Should we be drafting for best talent or best fit? Let's take this as two questions. I think that the Thunder are going to trade up if they get bad lottery luck. The reason for that being, you look at Tankathon, and let's just spin on Tankathon and do the opposite, right? Usually you spin to get a good result. Let's spin to get a bad result. It just so happens the bad result is the first result. So I'm not going to do a lot of spinning here. So, the Pacers at pick 1, Detroit pick 2, Houston pick 3, Charlotte pick 4, Orlando pick 5, OKC pick 6. The thing here is you can package 6 and 12 and, or in this case, 6 and 13 in a future first round pick, or just 6 in a future first round pick. And I think you can move up fairly sizably, because the Pacers, Pistons, Rockets, and Hornets, let's just go to the top 4. they in all likelihood in this draft have a vastly different looking top four. That the Pacers might want to trade back with Houston because they feel like they can get their number one option at pick 3 because there's no clear cut number one. And the Rockets might want to trade up because their number one's Jabari Smith and the Pacers number one is Chet Holmgren, and they think that they can both be satisfied with that in one fell swoop, right? And so I said it to say the topsy-turviness of everyone's board will lead to more ability to trade up because you have different leverage points. It's also a draft class where you can talk yourself out of a lot of guys, right? So you might be at pick 3 and see more value in next year's draft being so loaded and so talent heavy that you'd be willing to go down from 3 to pick 6, but also get a first round pick next year. That's unprotected. And the Thunder might value whoever's at 3 between Chet, Paulo, Jabari, Jaden Ivey, whoever they want at 3 to be willing to do that. So it's just an interesting study here on the draft. And I think that with this year's draft, you can easily trade up. So I think that if they don't get lottery luck, they will be trading up in this NBA draft. And we'll see kind of what that means and what that package looks like. But I just don't see a way where they don't trade up unless they just love Shaedon Sharpe or a guy that is projected to fall to them. And then should the Thunder be drafting for best talent or best fit? To me, in an ideal world, you do both. For example, I have the best talent in this draft being Jabari Smith. I also have the best fit in this draft being Jabari Smith. So to me, he fits seamlessly with what Josh Giddey and SGA are trying to do in terms of being ball dominant guards, fits into that plan seamlessly, and is also extremely talented and the best talent in this draft. But in general, the Thunder, and Sam Presti has alluded to as much, they're still in talent accumulation mode, and they're still trying to look for the best talent that they can get. So I'd say you draft for best talent and best possible talent versus safest or versus best fit. So I'm not just going to go out and draft Jalen Duren at 4 because the Thunder, well, they need a center, so let's just get Jalen Duren. Whenever you could also get Jalen Duren at 12 or 10. I have him at 9 on my big board, so somewhere in the top 12 you're going to get Jalen Duren, but not at 4, right? You're still going to need the best player, not necessarily who kind of fits the roster positionally in this draft. Another question comes from at Terencida, I believe is how you pronounce your at. I'm sorry again if I mispronounced that. Where does Jabari fit into the Thunder plans? He doesn't particularly fit in the ball handler role, so I'm wondering if Sam Presti even would take a chance on him. Also, do you see Poku getting more minutes next season? The Poku question, I think, is totally dependent on the draft. So I will circle back and answer this question after the draft. You might have to remind me, but I will do it after the draft. I think there'll be a natural conversation after the draft as well. But it really depends on who the Thunder draft, right? There's a way where Poku gets better than the depth chart this year, depending on the draft class. So we'll talk about that whenever we see the draft class in hand. As far as Jabari Smith's fit with Thunder, I think is perfect because he's not ball dominant. Jabari Smith can still ball handle. He can still dribble at an effective level. He can still pass at an effective level. He can still do what he needs to do with the ball in his hands. But that's not the driving force of his offensive impact. That fits seamlessly with SGA and Josh Giddey. If it's a playoff scenario and you need multiple ball handlers and Josh Giddey and SGA need another ball handler with them, Jabari Smith can be a ball handler. He's just not going to be the ball handler. The way Jaden Ivey, for comparison, Jaden Ivey's most dominant trait is going to be isolation scoring and offense derivative off of isolation scoring. That's what Synergy grades out as an excellent trait for him. We did his draft profile and projection this week. You can go back and listen to those Synergy numbers on what the Purdue offense looked like whenever he was a ball dominant isolation offensive category, right? Whenever he was in that category of derivative offensive isolation, he was awesome. And that's kind of where he thrives at. So then that looks like 3 very ball dominant players, because for Josh Giddey, you need the ball in your hands to pass to other players and make them and set them up for great opportunity. For SGA, you need the ball in your hand to score offensively in isolation, which he's so good at. And for Jaden Ivey, you would need isolation scoring from him as well. So for Jabari Smith, I think this fit is awesome for this Thunder team. I think that this fit's awesome both long term and short term. I think that you win the most games next year with Jabari Smith, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it in terms of where this team's status is at. I think that long term, you win the most games with Jabari Smith. The only close, kind of the only close one would be Paolo Banchero if he just develops into a number one scorer and a number one offensive threat, then you can start to see him. If he's number one, then that means Shai's number two. And if Shai's number two on your team as a scorer, yeah, you're a really, really good team. So, like, that's kind of the one that you worry about with Paolo Banchero. But I think that Jabari Smith fits perfectly with this team. Coming up, though, we still have questions that need to be answered, and we'll do that on the other side. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at the Locked On NBA podcast. It's a national show. Everything you know about the NBA on a national level, from the play-in tournament all the way through the NBA Finals. We're taking you deeper into the NBA playoffs than ever before, including the offseason, which is where the Thunder, of course, are going to thrive. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. You can follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. Folks, make sure that you go out there and you subscribe to Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. It's free and available wherever you go do that. And I want to tell you right now, to continue to be locked on Thunder, because we're going to stay 5 days a week throughout the entire offseason. But let's continue answering your questions and what you have to say about the Oklahoma City Thunder during this time in the offseason. From Matt, Thunder Memes IG. Number one, can/will the Thunder trade up with the Clippers pick? Can they? Yes. This draft class is topsy-turvy, and especially out of the top three, because I think that everybody has the same top three. Of course, Mavs draft doesn't, though. Richard Stamen, who joins us every single week, will join us again next week. He has Chet at 4, but I think that typically the top 5 names are similar enough. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's anyone's guess. I mean, that is truly anyone's guess. So that leads itself, in my opinion, for an easier path to trading up. So can they? Yes. Will they? I'm not necessarily sure if they will or not. And look, I only have 26 first-round grades in this year's draft. 26. So, if you need to use 30 and 12 to move up, and if Sam Presti agrees with that number, then that leads less of a hesitation to do so. I think it'll be very interesting to see if they do that, but I think that it can happen for sure. And not just a can in the sense of, well, technically anything can happen, in the sense of it is more realistic this year to trade up than it was in previous drafts that we've covered here on Locked On Thunder. Can/will the Thunder trade up into the top 3 if they get a pick 5 or worse in the lottery? Went over that earlier. Yes, I think that this is going to be a year where it's easier to trade into the top 3. Obviously, it's still going to cost a lot, but it's still easier, more doable. And then number 3, should the Thunder try their luck and offer Miles Bridges / DeAndre Ayton in restricted free agency? I just don't see a way where DeAndre Ayton specifically is going to be let go by the Suns. I don't see a way they don't match it, especially if he continues to dominate this Mavs series as he has so far to this point anyway. Miles Bridges would be a fun option, but is it worth throwing a max at him and seeing the Hornets not realistically not match that, and then you're on the hook for a max contract with Miles Bridges? I just don't see the Thunder being very active in free agency at the top end. Your next question is also free agency: Mo Bamba / Mitchell Robinson. I mean, you take a swing at Mo Bamba, sure. I mean, that'd be fun, but that is really dependent on the draft and kind of who you've brought into that point in terms of the draft. From at MK325491. Which center would you rather have, Jalen Duren or Mark Williams, and why? Jalen Duren is my number 1 center on my board. I have him at 9. I have Mark Williams at 12. So I just kind of have them separated by the fact that I think that Jalen Duren's body is more NBA ready and more proven, despite being a couple inches shorter than Mark Williams. I think that Jalen Duren is going to be a kind of a, not throwback big, but also not a modern big, kind of a tweener big in between those two eras. I like Jalen Duren, but I'm not in love with him the way that some Thunder fans are. I don't think you need to go up there and get him at 4. But you get him at 12, that's fine. Or you trade up to number 9 or 10, whatever, that's fine as well. But Duren, Williams, I'd be fine with either one of them in Oklahoma City. I don't really think that this is a super strong center class. I think that Christian Koloko is not that far behind the other two, but you still need to give him some time even at 22 because he's going to be a raw center at 7-1. But there's just a lot of options. I mean, Dieng is also someone that people like a lot. I'm just not thrilled with anybody in the center class besides Chet Holmgren, of course, if you want to still count him as a center in the NBA. From at Janice Adams, what is the dream rotation for 2023, 2024? I think that it's Shea. I think your starters are Shea, Giddey, a proven NBA talent that we don't know who it is yet, Jabari Smith / Paul McCarroll / Chet Holmgren, and then another person, like another option, whoever that is at the time, throw him at center. Maybe it's Jalen Duren. Maybe it's let's just say that you get your dream scenario. You get 1 and 12, and Duren falls to 12. You draft Duren, so Duren's there, and then you get Paolo, Chet, Jabari, and then you trade for a Bradley Beal type disgruntled star, and then you have Josh Giddey, you have SGA, and then you still on the bench have Trey Mann, and then you still have Lou Dort at that point, or were you using him in a trade to go get somebody else? And then can you fill out your bench the way that you need to, as Trey Mann being a catalyst in that 6-man role? You have Trey Mann, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, players like that. That's kind of your dream scenario for 2023, 2024 to kind of make the playoffs and make a run at it. For Matt, Kevin Butler, OKC, where does Dyson Daniel rise after his late growth spurt? He seems like a good choice for the Thunder. A defensive-minded guard coming off the bench. Maybe take some time for a long-term project. Dyson Daniel I have him at 11 on my board, so he's easily going to be there at 12. If my board stacks up with what the NBA boards do, which really the board will have to change as I talk to agents and scouts throughout this process and kind of try to mirror that. But Daniels, I like Dyson Daniel. I think he's a great defensive player, but struggles to shoot, can't really create for himself, is good at creating for others. Again, 12, it's a fine selection, but it's not kind of who you would use the first pick that you have on. But I think that Dyson Daniel could fit with the Thunder, sure, off the bench. But at that point, I don't really know if the Thunder would be taking a guy with the idea in mind to bring him off the bench at pick 12. But maybe they do. I like Dyson Daniel in a vacuum, and we'll see kind of how that rolls. From at Gould Kobe, just says Shaedon Sharpe. Love it. I like Shaedon Sharpe. I have at pick 4. I love the comment there. Shaedon Sharpe, love him in this draft as well. Infamous Kid 091. If OKC falls out of the top 5 again, who should the Thunder draft? So if they fall out of the top 5, my number 6 is AJ Griffin, and then Keegan Murray, and then Benedict Mathurin, and then Jalen Duren, and then Johnny Davis, and then Dyson Daniel, and then Mark Williams. Let's not go through the whole list, but Akai Bashi rounds out the lottery. So I love AJ Griffin. I think if you don't have AJ Griffin, if he doesn't have those injury concerns, he'd be even higher than pick 6. Again, you say fall out of the top 5. I have Sharpe in my top 5 and Ivy in my top 5, but as the rest of the NBA, you could see easily a path for Shaedon Sharpe to fall to 6, and then I'd take Shaedon Sharpe. But I'd say at pick 6, you should be able to get one of the two, Sharpe or Griffin, and that's the pick to me. A clear-cut pick for the Thunder in that scenario. At Tino_0194, what jersey would you like to bring back for next season? Okay, so past Thunder jersey, I would go. I loved those statement blues. That was kind of the inverse of the sunset ones. The year that it was Paul George wearing them and looking like an MVP. I'm talking about the navy with the orange lines through it, and kind of the inverse of the sunset ones. I love those ones. I'd bring those back. I love the Oklahoma City Memorial jerseys. I'd bring those back. But other than that, that's kind of where I'd stick in terms of for the Thunder. I'd bring back the Mavericks green jerseys if I could, like just a true old school Mavericks green jerseys in terms of the rest of the NBA. Other than that, the league's did a good job of bringing back the old NBA jerseys that we all love. I like the Spurs even brought back a version of the Fiesta jerseys, so that was really cool. But that is kind of where I'm at on jerseys on the jersey front. At _NED_ drafting Duren with our pick. Not at 4, but anywhere else I'd be glad with Jalen Duren. And then at Cray. What's up, Cray? What's your vertical? A solid 0.5 inches is my vertical. If you want to put me in the combine. But I think I've gotten to every question. Thank you to everyone who has asked questions during this draft day off-season, vibey off-season episode. We'll be back tomorrow on Thursday with a special guest, Chisholm Holland of 1077 The Franchise, talking all about the NBA and also the Thunder and wrapping up the Thunder season. And then Friday, we'll have another NBA draft player profile and projection. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.